The fluorescent lights hummed their endless mechanical song at 05 for 5 when Ashley Cooper's hand smoothed the wrinkles from her starched scrubs, pulling the fabric taut across her ribs with the precision of someone who'd dressed in the dark 1,000 times. Oak Creek Memorial's East Wing was barely awake, just the soft beep of overnight monitoring systems and the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoe on linoleum. She moved through her pre-shift routine with the efficiency of ritual, inventory count at the medication station, for setup on the crash cart, vitals monitor checks. Every task flowed into the next without thought, her body remembering what her mind refused to dwell on. A surgical resident brushed past her in the corridor without acknowledgement, his white coat flaring like a sail. Ashley stepped aside reflexively, pressing herself against the cold wall, making herself smaller. It was something she'd perfected over 9 years, the art of occupying space without being seen in it. Her eyes tracked his hands as he passed, muscle memory reading threat assessment in the curl of his fingers, the angle of his shoulders. Old habits. Useful habits. The kind of habits you never actually lost, no matter how hard you tried to become someone else. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and the faint chemical ghost of industrial cleaner. She opened her locker at 0603, the metal door swinging inward with its familiar squeak. A photograph was taped to the interior, her daughter at 28, standing on a beach in California, smiling at something off camera. That photo had been there for 4 years. Her daughter didn't know why her mother worked 12-hour shifts at a hospital in Raleigh. She didn't know about Sanjin Valley or the 3 miles through enemy fire or why certain sounds made Ashley's shoulders tense like a coiling spring. She didn't know any of it, and that was the point. Below the photograph, wrapped in plastic and dust-free despite years of stillness, were combat boots. Well worn. The leather creased at the toe from 1,000 footfalls across desert floors and concrete bunkers. The laces were still tied, she'd never undone them, just pulled them off her feet and placed them here the day she decided to stop being Senior Chief Petty Officer Ashley Cooper and start being Ashley the nurse. A nurse was invisible. A nurse was forgettable. A nurse could disappear into any hospital in America and simply exist in the margins, healing people without anyone asking who she'd been or what she'd done. Her hands hovered over the boots for 3 seconds, an eternity, before she closed the locker door and turned away. The limp in her left leg was barely perceptible. Most people didn't notice it, especially when she was moving with purpose, when her body was engaged in the mechanical precision of medical work. The injury was old. The scar tissue had healed unevenly 9 years ago in a field hospital at FOB Shank, but the physical therapy had been thorough, and she'd learned to compensate. Her gait suggested a minor knee problem, something she'd probably developed from years of standing at bedside. It suggested nothing else. Nothing interesting. Nothing threatening. At 0617, she pulled the chart for room 347 and felt something shift in her chest, the kind of shift she'd trained herself to suppress. Lance Corporal Davis, 24 years old. The admission photo showed a young face, the same face she'd last seen smiling at her in Helm and Province before everything went to hell. Her eyes traced the outline of his jaw, the way his hair was buzzed short in the photo. She studied his vitals from the previous shift, pain management still inconsistent, sleep cycles disrupted, notes from the overnight nurse indicating restlessness and what the chart delicately called emotional dysregulation. She knew that dysregulation. She lived inside it every day, just quieter. Just better hidden. The chart noted a forearm tattoo but provided no description. Ashley set the papers down with controlled precision, her breath steady, her face arranged into the neutral expression she wore like armor. She had carried Lance Corporal Davis 3 miles through the Sanjin Valley when an IED took out his unit's transport. 3 miles under sporadic fire, his arms slung over her shoulders, her hand pressed against a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. 3 miles of whispering tactical updates in his ear to keep him conscious, to keep him moving, to keep him alive. And then the helicopter had come, and she'd handed him over to army medics, and that had been the last time she saw him conscious. She wasn't supposed to form attachments. Command had drilled that into everyone's bones years ago. Compartmentalize. Prioritize. Move forward. The dead stay dead. The living move on. But compartmentalization hadn't worked with Davis. He'd survived when 31 others hadn't, and she'd kept a partial folder on him after she left, back when she could still access certain networks. California, 2019. Seattle, 2021. Raleigh, 2024. A trail of hospitals where he'd been transferred for pain management and psychiatric treatment. And now he was here, in room 347, 2 floors above where she pushed medication carts and changed dressings and made herself invisible. Dr. Hargrove arrived at 0630 like an announced weather system, the kind of atmospheric pressure change that made small animals take shelter. His watch flashed Rolex silver as he tossed his coat toward a nurse without looking, already deep in conversation on his cell phone. His voice carried the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to bending the world to his specifications. The Medtronic contract, yes. Adjusted numbers should move before the quarterly audit, he was saying, nodding at someone in the hallway who jumped to attention. And tell procurement we need those stent markups reflected by end of week. The board won't approve expansion if we're leaving money on the table. Ashley was refilling water pitchers at the nurse station when his eyes found her, just a brief scan, the kind of look a hunter gives a landscape before deciding whether anything's worth hunting. But something in that gaze snagged. She felt it like a hook-catching fabric. She didn't look up from her work, didn't acknowledge the attention, just continued methodically filling each pitcher with cool water from the dispenser. The ice clinked softly as she added it, the sound small and insignificant. Hargrove's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Which one is this?" he asked the charge nurse, Dr. Patricia Chen, gesturing loosely in Ashley's direction. Chen's expression tightened slightly. "Ashley Cooper. She's been with us for 9 years. Excellent evaluations. Patient reviews consistently high." Hargrove's eyes lingered for another moment. "She moves like she's always looking for an exit." "Quiet person," Chen said carefully. "Does her job, keeps to herself." "Perfect." Hargrove checked his phone. "I'm running morning rounds in 8 minutes. Tell her to pull room 347's chart." At 0638, Ashley entered room 347 with the water pitcher, her movements economical and practiced. Lance Corporal Davis was sitting upright in bed, his left arm resting on the blanket. The full line in his right arm had shifted slightly overnight, she could see the tape beginning to curl at the edges. His face was turned toward the window, toward the grey Raleigh morning beyond the glass. She didn't speak, just moved to adjust the 4, checking the placement with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. The tattoo was on his inner forearm, just as she'd known it would be. 2 names in military script, the ink faded slightly from years of exposure. And below them, smaller but unmistakable, Chief Cooper. Her hand steadied the 4 line. Her face remained blank. The muscle in her jaw didn't twitch, though she felt it trying. Pain was information. The tightness in her chest was just data, something to acknowledge and file away. She smoothed a wrinkle in the tape, her fingers barely brushing his skin. "Morning, Lance Corporal," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, deferential, the voice of someone who occupied space apologetically. "How was your pain level overnight?" Davis turned his head to look at her, and for a moment, just a fraction of a second, Ashley saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition? Confusion? Something that might have been the ghost of a memory? But then it vanished, replaced by the flat, medicated distance of someone swimming through pharmaceutical fog. "Pretty rough," he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered, worn down by years of physical therapy and psychological treatment. "They won't give me anything stronger." "I'll make a note," Ashley said, already moving away from the bed. "Dr. Hargrove will be in soon. Let me know if you need anything before then." She was filling his water cup when she heard Hargrove's voice in the hallway, loud enough that half the wing heard it clearly. She recognized the tone, the performative doctor voice, the kind he used when he wanted an audience for his jokes. $10 says that quiet one on the east side quits within the week, he was saying to a cluster of medical students, all of them nodding like he'd just delivered gospel. "She's got that look about her." Fragile. Can't handle the real work. Watch. By Friday she'll have had some breakdown and filed termination paperwork. Easy money. The students laughed nervously, the kind of laugh people make when they sense a shark moving through water but aren't sure if they should run or stay still. Ashley set the water cup on Davis's bedside table with steady hands. The cup didn't rattle. Her breathing remained even and deep. She turned toward the door just as Hargrove appeared in the doorway, flanked by his medical team like courtiers approaching a throne. He was checking his phone as he entered, the gesture dismissive, already looking past both the patient and the nurse as if they were fixtures rather than people. "Lance Corporal Davis," he said brightly, redirecting his attention to his patient with the switch of a spotlight. "How are we feeling this morning?" "Bad," Davis said simply. "Shoulders killing me." Hargrove nodded, still not really listening, gesturing for the resident to check the bandaging. And then his eyes passed over Ashley as she moved toward the exit, and she saw something flicker there too, not recognition, but assessment. The look a man gives a playing board before he makes his opening move. She had no idea what was about to happen. Morning rounds at Oak Creek Memorial carried the particular hum of a hospital between shift changes, fluorescent lights casting everything in that sterile noon glow, monitors beeping their scattered rhythm down the hallway, the smell of antiseptic lead thick enough to taste. Ashley moved through her assignments with the precision of someone who'd learned long ago that visibility was dangerous. Chart check. Vital sign review. For line assessment. She was adjusting Lance Corporal Davis's line in room 347 when she heard the footsteps behind her, distinctive, unhurried, the gait of a man who'd never been told no. Dr. Hargrove entered the room like he owned the air inside it. "Nurse Cooper," he said, his voice carrying that particular edge of contempt reserved for people he'd already decided were beneath him. He moved past her toward the patient's monitor, deliberately bumping her elbow as he passed. The fall line slipped. Just slightly. Just enough that he could make it matter. "If you can't handle basic for placement, perhaps we should find you work in the gift shop instead." Ashley reset the line with steady hands. Her fingers knew exactly what they were doing, muscle memory older than her nursing license, trained through scenarios far worse than a bumped elbow. She didn't respond. Didn't look at him. Didn't let anything flicker across her face except the professional neutrality of a nurse adjusting equipment. But Lance Corporal Davis was watching. Still groggy from his morning pain medication, still caught in that half-aware state where the brain couldn't quite assemble context, he stared at her face like someone trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. His eyes tracked the efficiency of her movements. The way she scanned the room without seeming to look. The tactical positioning of her body between the monitor and his bedside. Something in his morphine-fogged consciousness reached for recognition and came up empty. Hargrove noticed the stare. He read it as incompetence instead of what it actually was, a Marine recognizing a presence his own mind couldn't quite name. "Even the patients can see you're out of your depth, sweetheart," Hargrove said, the diminutive landing like a blade disguised as kindness. He smiled as he left, the kind of smile that belonged on a man who'd won something. Ashley took one measured breath. She maintained eye contact with the wall in front of her. She said nothing. The silence that followed was the sound of a hunter being catalogued by his prey. What Hargrove didn't understand was that silence was a weapon. Restraint was information. Every second she didn't respond, every tear she didn't shed, every moment she remained standing instead of breaking, that was her telling him something his ego couldn't hear. That was her promise being made in the language he'd forgotten how to speak. The cafeteria orchestration came at 11:30, which meant Hargrove had spent the preceding 90 minutes calculating the exact conditions he needed. A full tray in her hands. The maximum possible audience. The right angle of approach. He waited until she'd left the serving line and was navigating the crowded space between tables, her attention divided between the tray and the navigation, the way all civilian-trained nurses moved, present but not aware, moving through space instead of commanding it. He rose from the attending physician's table like he was simply stretching. 16 staff members watched from surrounding tables, nurses, residents, one respiratory therapist, a handful of orderlies. Perfect. He angled toward her, timing his stride to intercept her path, and in one smooth motion that could be called accident, could be called clumsiness, could be called a lot of things if anyone cared enough to look closer, he bumped her shoulder and let her momentum carry the tray directly into the air. The crash was the kind of sound that stops conversations. Soup and salad exploded across tile. Orange juice bloomed across the floor like slow-motion watercolor. A roll scattered into the corner. Ashley stared at her hands for 1 second, just one, watching the emptiness where the tray had been, processing the physics of it, understanding the precision that had led to this moment. "Oh, Nurse Cooper, how clumsy," Hargrove said, his voice carrying through the silence like honey mixed with broken glass. "Don't worry. We all have our limitations." She knelt to clean it without being told. Hand steady. Eyes focused on the spilled remnant spreading across the tile. One tear tracked down her cheek, not from pain, not from shame, but from something deeper, something that came from a place where she'd knelt in foxholes while rounds came in, where she'd held the hand of a 19-year-old Marine whose chest had stopped moving, where she'd learned that survival was sometimes just the choice to keep breathing when breathing felt impossible. She wiped it away without breaking her posture, without flinching, the way soldiers learn to move through things that would break ordinary people. Hargrove wasn't finished. He never was when someone showed him this kind of composure. He disappeared into the hallway and returned with a patient chart, dropped it at her feet with the kind of precision that only came from someone who'd practiced the motion in his mind. "Pick that up, sweetheart, since you're already down there cleaning up your messes." The room had gone the kind of quiet that belonged in churches or funeral homes. 16 people watching. 16 people understanding what they were witnessing. 16 people waiting to see what this would break. Ashley rose slowly. Deliberately. She picked up the chart with one hand, straightened her spine, and said quietly, so quietly that Hargrove had to lean forward to hear it, had to bend his entire body toward her to catch the words, "I've been on my knees in worse places than this, doctor, and I'm still standing." Hargrove's smile tightened. Just fractionally. Just enough that someone paying attention would have seen the muscle clench along his jaw. His hand closed into a fist that he forced back open, forced into the pocket of his white coat. He turned and left without another word, but what Ashley had just done was upgrade herself from inconvenience to threat. Threats needed to be eliminated. Strategic threats needed to be eliminated methodically, with documentation, with witnesses, with a paper trail that would look professional when examined by the hospital's legal department. That afternoon, he gathered 3 senior nurses in the hallway just outside room 347, positioned perfectly so his voice would carry into the patient room where Ashley was checking Davis' for pump settings. His tone stayed light, conversational, the way predators learn to sound when stalking prey. "I give her 1 week before she quits," he announced, producing a $100 bill from his wallet and slapping it on the counter with a sound like a gunshot on tile. "Maybe less. Some people just aren't cut out for real medicine. The kind where you have to actually handle pressure instead of folding under basic social stress." He smiled. "Any takers on my timeline?" 2 of the nurses laughed nervously, a reflexive sound that meant nothing and everything at once. One simply walked away, which meant she'd already heard from someone else that picking a side against Hargrove's interests was a path toward professional isolation. Inside room 347, Ashley checked Davis' vitals with hands that had started to shake, imperceptible tremors, the kind that only came when adrenaline mixed with the understanding that someone with institutional power had just decided you were disposable. She hid the shaking by gripping the chart tighter, by keeping her hands in motion, by doing the thing she'd always done when circumstances became unbearable. She focused on the work. Lance Corporal Davis stared at her again. His eyes tracked the efficient movements, the tactical scan of the room, the way her body angled to maintain awareness of the door and the monitor and the bed all at once. Something in his morphine-addled brain was trying desperately to connect neurons that wouldn't quite fire. He looked down at his forearm where Chief Cooper was tattooed in block letters beneath a trident, 2 lines of identification that had been seared into his skin 5 years ago by a grateful Marine who'd survived something he should have died from. Then he looked back at her face, searching, reaching for recognition that wouldn't come. Nothing clicked. Ashley saw him looking. Saw the confusion. Saw the tattoo that proved who she was to him despite the 14 years and the scrubs and the choice she'd made to become someone else. Her composure fractured for exactly half a second, a microsecond of something raw crossing her face before she rebuilt the walls and walked out of the room. She closed the door behind her and stood in the hallway for 4 seconds, breathing the recycled hospital air, telling herself that this was the choice she'd made. Anonymity. Safety. A life where nobody knew what she'd been or what she was capable of doing. The shift change arrived at 1,500 with the particular chaos that only an emergency department could generate. 2 ambulances screaming in from a multi-vehicle collision on IE40. A cardiac patient arriving via private car because their family couldn't afford the ambulance fee. The normal cascading urgency of an afternoon surge that meant every available staff member was suddenly moving faster, talking faster, thinking 3 steps ahead just to keep current. Ashley was restocking supply closet C when the voices started. Not normal department noise. Elevated. Edged with fear. The kind of acoustic signature that meant something was wrong in a way that had nothing to do with medical emergency and everything to do with safety. She moved toward the sound with the practiced quiet of someone who'd learned that most threats didn't announce themselves properly. Stayed along the wall. Used the door frames as cover. Kept her profile narrow. A 250-pound man in dirty cargo pants and a stained tactical jacket was at the triage desk, sweat running down his temples in rivers despite the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. His pupils were dilated so wide they looked like holes burned through his irises. One hand was inside his jacket. One hand was gripping the edge of the desk hard enough to turn his knuckles white. "I need oxy," he said, his voice raw, urgent, the acoustic signature of someone riding the edge of desperation mixed with chemical amplification. "I need it now." Frank, the security guard, 63 years old, 3 months from retirement, grandfather of 4, had both hands up, backing toward the wall with the slow, careful movements of someone who'd been trained in de-escalation and was actively praying it would work this time. 2 nurses had dropped behind the desk. An orderly was running toward the emergency exit. The man pulled a .45 from his jacket. The gun was a Colt 1911 model, a weapon Ashley had fired thousands of times in training, a weapon that at this distance and in this man's trembling hands meant immediate lethal threat. He waved it in wide arcs like he was painting the room with it, like violence was something he could distribute in all directions equally. "Everybody down," he screamed. "I'm not playing. Get me a doctor, get me pills, or people start bleeding." Hargrove appeared in the hallway behind the surgical doors, assessed the situation in exactly 2 seconds, and immediately retreated, his phone already in his hand, already making the calculations about liability, about how this incident would reflect on his department, about whether the hospital's insurance would cover this particular brand of catastrophe. He didn't retreat toward help. He retreated toward a position of safety. Ashley watched the gunman's breathing pattern. Shallow. Rapid. Labored. The way a man breathed when his left side felt like something was standing on it, pressing down with the weight of the world. She noted the slight blue tint to his lips. The favoring of his right side. The compensatory posture. Tension pneumothorax, his lung had partially collapsed, probably from an old injury, probably military, definitely triggered by agitation and the exertion of adrenaline coursing through a system that couldn't handle the load. 3 minutes. Maybe 4 before his body made the decision to shut down. Everyone else was frozen. The security guard. The nurses. The orderly trying to decide whether to keep running. The triage coordinator with her hand over her mouth. All of them waiting for someone else to act, for someone with authority to suddenly appear and fix this, for the situation to somehow resolve itself through the magic of institutional hierarchy. She stepped into the open. Her hands came up to shoulder height, visible, non-threatening in the way that every civilian recognition video taught, palms out, elbows bent, the international gesture for "I'm not a threat." Except her stance was wrong. Her posture was wrong. Her entire body language was wrong in a way that only a trained operator would understand. She was centered. Balanced. Positioned in a way that meant she could move in any direction with minimal transition time. She started walking directly toward the man with the gun. Frank hissed "Cooper, Eno," from his position against the wall, but she didn't alter course. Didn't slow. Didn't acknowledge that he'd spoken. Her voice came out steady. Calm. With a cadence that didn't match civilian nursing, didn't match anyone who'd learned medicine in a traditional hospital setting. It matched the tone of someone who'd spoken across tense rooms in 3 different countries, who'd learned to thread words through panic the way other people threaded needles. "Brother, I can see you're hurting," she said, her voice level and precise. "I can see you can't breathe right. That's not the pain you came for, that's something else. Something older. That's about to put you down hard if we don't fix it." The man swung the gun toward her. His hand was shaking. The barrel traced across the space where her chest was, and she didn't flinch, didn't stop, didn't slow. "Stay back," he yelled. She kept walking. Kept talking. The distance closing. 10 feet. 9. 8. "Check your chest," she said. "Left side. Feels like someone's standing on it, right? Old injury, maybe blast-related, maybe vehicle accident, maybe something you haven't thought about in 5 years. You're running out of time, and if you pass out with that thing in your hand, you're not waking up." His eyes flickered. Just slightly. The flicker of recognition. Of someone speaking a language he'd thought was dead. "How did you—" he started. 90 seconds, she said. "That's how long I've been talking. Your O2 sat is probably dropping. You need to sit down. You need to let me help you sit down. The gun goes on the desk first." "I need." "I know what you need," Ashley said. "But this isn't how you get it. This is how you get arrested or dead. This is how you end 13 years of staying clean. You came to a hospital. That means some part of you knows that medical help is what you actually need." 60 feet away, Dr. Hargrove watched from the surgical corridor. He was already calculating how this would be reported. How the press would cover it. Whether the hospital administration would blame the nursing staff or the security team or the triage protocols. He was already, in the back of his mind, beginning to think about how eliminating the problem of Ashley Cooper would be significantly more complicated if she saved lives in crisis situations. Competent people were always harder to remove than incompetent ones. But that wasn't the worst part. Ashley was within 6 feet now. Inside the danger zone. The distance where a bullet wouldn't miss. The distance where her entire body language was completely wrong for a frightened civilian. Too centered. Too balanced. The posture of someone who'd been trained to close distance against armed opposition, who'd spent years learning to move through spaces that wanted to kill her. The gun hand lowered slightly. His hand trembled. The .45 hung at his side like a weight he couldn't carry anymore. Ashley's voice had dropped 3 octaves, the kind of calm that comes from having already survived the worst, the kind that makes predators recognize another predator. "You're not here for pills," she said quietly. "You're here because something broke inside. I know that feeling." The man's eyes were glassy, pupils blown wide from whatever cocktail he'd mixed into his veins that afternoon. Oxycodone, probably. Maybe fentanyl. His breathing was fast, too fast, the kind of breathing that comes from a nervous system running on overdrive. He'd been screaming 5 minutes ago, profanities, threats, demands that made the security guards huddle behind the front desk like prey animals recognizing the apex predator had entered their territory. A .45 caliber Colt 1911, military issue probably, held with the grip of someone who'd never trained with it. His finger was outside the trigger guard. That detail meant something. That detail meant he didn't want to shoot, not really. "Nobody moves," he'd shouted when he burst through the ER doors at 1,503 hours, the automatic doors still hissing closed behind him. "I need oxycodone. I need it now or I start putting holes in people." The waiting room had erupted into chaos. A mother grabbed her child. An elderly man in a neck brace tried to stand and immediately sat back down. The receptionist's hand moved toward a panic button. Security officer Frank Martinez had positioned himself behind the check-in desk, speaking urgently into his radio, his hand nowhere near his own weapon. Ashley had been reviewing medication logs at the central station. She'd looked up, registered the scene in a 3-second visual scan, threat assessment, exit routes, environmental hazards, the patient load in surrounding rooms, and her training had catalogued everything the way a sniper catalogues wind speed and distance. The gun was being held low. His stance was wide, unbalanced. His eyes were moving too fast, tracking too many targets. He was panicking. She stood. She set down her pen. She walked directly toward him with her hands visible and her palms open. "Stop," he'd screamed, raising the gun. She didn't stop. She kept walking. "I said stop, lady, I will shoot you, I will shoot everyone in this hospital." "I know you will," Ashley said. Her voice was steady as a surgical laser. "I know you're hurting. I know the pills aren't working anymore and nothing feels real and you need something to make the pain stop and you don't care if that something kills you." She took another step. Then another. "I've been there." The lie was perfect. Comfortable. A lie told with such certainty that the gunman's face shifted, just slightly, from rage to something that looked like recognition. She was 3 feet away now. 2 feet. The gun hand was wavering. "My name is Ashley," she said. "What's yours?" "Marcus." "Don't come closer." "I'm not joking, don't." "Marcus, I'm going to put my hand on your arm. I'm not going to take the gun. I'm just going to touch you so you know you're not alone." Her hand moved like water, slow and inevitable. "You're going to be okay." 90 seconds. That was how long she talked. 90 seconds of her voice moving through the quiet hospital like a current, pulling him out of the current of his own panic. Her hand on his arm. Her eyes holding his. The gun lowering. Lowering. His shoulders shaking, not with rage anymore but with something that looked like grief, the kind of grief that comes from realizing you're about to hurt people you don't want to hurt. His knees buckled. Ashley caught him as he fell, her hands already assessing, the tremor in his muscles, the heat pouring off his skin, the way his breathing had shifted from fast to something worse, something labored. The .45 dropped. She caught it with her left hand, cleared the chamber with one fluid motion that made Frank's eyes go wide from behind the desk, and set the weapon on the floor beside her in a single gesture that looked practiced because it was. His lips were already turning blue. She lowered him to the ground, her knee under his back, and that's when she felt it, the tension in his chest, the way his ribs seemed to be drawing up toward his throat. His neck veins were distended, standing out like cables beneath his skin. His trachea was deviated. She'd seen this before. Once in Sanjin during a firefight when a Marine had taken shrapnel that he didn't even realize had punctured his lung. Once in a trauma bay in Germany when a vehicle rollover had compressed a man's chest cavity wrong. Tension pneumothorax. The collapsed lung was compressing his heart. He had minutes. "I need a 14-gauge needle," she said. Not screamed. Not panicked. Just stated it like she was ordering coffee. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Now. A nurse frozen behind the desk didn't move. Ashley's voice dropped. "Move." The nurse moved like she'd been physically shoved, sprinting for the supply cabinet. The sound of her footsteps echoed, the running shoes slapping tile, the cabinet drawer yanked open with enough force to rattle glass bottles, the urgent scrape of someone finding what they needed because the alternative was unthinkable. Marcus's eyes were rolling back. His mouth was open. The oxygen wasn't getting to his brain anymore, the pressure in his chest cavity was collapsing the vein that should have been carrying blood, and Ashley could feel his pulse getting weaker under her fingers. She ripped his shirt open. Her hands found the landmarks by touch, the second rib, the space below it, the ribs like rails on a skeleton that wanted to tell her exactly where to go. She'd done this under fire. She could do it in a sterile ER with fluorescent lights and witnesses and all the time in the world. The nurse returned with the needle. Ashley's hands didn't shake. They never did. She located the precise point, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, and advanced the 14-gauge angiocath needle at a perpendicular angle through the skin and fascia and musculature until it penetrated the pleural space, and the hiss of escaping air was immediate, sharp, the sound of pressure releasing like opening a valve on a tank that had been building pressure for too long. His color improved in seconds. The blue faded from his lips. His breathing opened up. His eyes came back into focus, suddenly present again, suddenly present in his own body. She maintained pressure on the needle site, called for a gurney, called for oxygen, called for an 4-line and got 3 nurses moving in coordinated motion because they could feel her authority like a presence in the room. The ER team flooded in, 2 more nurses, a resident, a respiratory tech with a portable ultrasound to confirm what everyone already knew. She handed off the patient with a 3-sentence report: tension pneumothorax from blunt chest trauma, needle decompression performed at 1,504 hours, vital stabilizing, probable old wound complication. Dr. Hargrove reappeared now that the danger had passed, materializing from his office like he'd been watching on a monitor the whole time. He clapped his hands together. Good work, everyone. Excellent crisis response. That's textbook protocol. He was taking credit. He hadn't moved from his office. He hadn't helped. He hadn't been anywhere near the patient. But he'd said everyone and clapped his hands like he'd been part of the choreography. Ashley stood, stepping back from the gurney as it rolled toward the elevators. Her scrubs were soaked with Marcus's sweat. Her hands were still covered in his blood. The disassembled .45 lay on the floor beside her: hammer, frame, barrel, spring, magazine, all the pieces that made it a weapon now scattered like a child's toy. Hargrove's eyes found hers across the chaos. His expression shifted. Relief, yes. Relief that no one had been shot, that the hospital's liability insurance wouldn't have to pay out millions. But beneath that relief was something else. Calculation. The kind of calculation that comes when a person realizes they've underestimated something. The way she'd moved toward the gunman. The way she'd cleared that weapon. The tactical medicine. The command presence that had made 3 nurses move in synchronized response to a voice that had never raised its volume above a normal conversational tone. Her personnel file said she was just a nurse. Just a RN with 6 years at Oak Creek Memorial, quiet, competent, no special certifications beyond standard hospital protocols. Her hands just said something different. Hargrove's jaw tightened. He turned and walked back to his office. 20 minutes later, he was on the phone. His office door was closed but not locked. His voice carried through the hospital walls the way voices do in buildings designed for acoustics that don't match the conversations people want to keep private. First call, board member Patricia Chen. Patricia, I need a favor. Yes, I know I called in the last one. This is different. I need you to request a full audit of our nursing staff hiring practices. Specifically one employee. No, I can't say on the phone. Just tell the administration that we have compliance concerns. The pause while she answered. Yes, her. Cooper. Thank you. Second call, county administration. I need to report a concern about a hiring decision. No formal complaint yet, I'm still assessing. But one of our nurses may have submitted an application with incomplete background verification. Yes, I understand the process. I'm requesting a secondary review by your department. The courtesy in his voice like a mask. I'm sure it's nothing. Just procedural. Third call, an employment screening firm. He'd used them before for other situations. His voice with them was different, less courtesy, more command. I need you to audit an application. Full workup. Criminal, financial, references, employment history, education verification. I'm looking for discrepancies. Anything that doesn't match. No, this is confidential. Yes, I can pay the rush fee. The voice of someone used to getting what he wanted. I need results by tomorrow afternoon. Fourth call, hospital security. Frank, I need you to start documenting behavioral concerns about staff nurse Cooper. No, nothing serious. Just unusual responses to situations. Inappropriate command presence. Yes, I know she just de-escalated a dangerous situation. That's exactly what I mean. The way she moved. The way she took command. Keep a log. Nothing formal yet, just observations. In the ICU, Marcus stabilized within the hour. His oxygen saturation climbed to 96%. His blood pressure normalized. The ultrasound confirmed the diagnosis, tension pneumothorax from what appeared to be an old chest wound, shrapnel or bullet wound probably, something that had happened years ago and never fully healed. The scar tissue had ruptured under the stress of acute agitation and drug use. In room 347, Lance Corporal Davis watched from his wheelchair in the hallway during the chaos. He'd heard the screaming. He'd heard the gunshots' demands. He'd watched a nurse walk toward a man with a loaded weapon like she was walking to get coffee. He'd watched her catch the gun. Clear it. Execute a needle decompression with the precision of someone who'd done it under fire. He was staring at her back as she walked away from the ICU, still covered in Marcus's blood, her face composed, her breathing steady, her hands not shaking. His hand moved to the tattoo on his forearm. Chief Cooper. The name in black ink against the scar tissue of his own old wound. The Marine he'd carried 3 miles through Sanjin under enemy fire. The Marine who'd held pressure on his leg when the IED took the feeling out of everything below his knee. The Marine who'd kept him alive by refusing to accept that survival was optional. But the morphine in his system and the trauma in his memory wouldn't let him surface the connection. It was there, just below the surface, vibrating like a tuning fork struck but not yet resonating. His brain screaming recognition while his damaged neural pathways refused to make the connection complete. He watched her disappear around the corner toward the break room. His hand trembled on the tattoo. Something was about to change. The locker was already empty when she arrived at 05:05. Ashley stood in the darkened break room, fluorescent strips still cold, and stared at the cardboard box sitting on the metal bench. Her name written in black marker on the side. Inside, her stethoscope, coiled like a snake. The small framed photo of her and Emma at Wrightsville Beach, 2019. Her trauma shears with the military call sign she'd thought was hidden. 3 pairs of compression socks, still folded. Her badge clipped to a stack of unpaid continuing education certificates. Charge Nurse Marsha appeared in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes locked on the floor tiles. Marsha. What happened here? Hargrove wants you in administration at 0600. Marsha's voice was barely audible. He called me at home at midnight. Said to remove your locker contents and box them. Said to tell you. She finally glanced up, and Ashley saw genuine distress. I'm sorry. I don't know what you did, but whatever it was, he's going to fire you for it. Ashley picked up the box. It weighed almost nothing. 9 years at Oak Creek Memorial, consolidated into cardboard and silence. The administration hallway was still dark when she climbed the stairs, her shoes making soft whispers against the carpet. Through the windows, Raleigh was still asleep. The sky was that particular shade of pre-dawn gray, the kind of gray that felt like standing inside a photograph of the world rather than the world itself. Dr. Hargrove sat behind his mahogany desk like a man who'd already written the ending. Hospital attorney Margaret Stiles sat to his right, laptop open, expression neutral in the way lawyers cultivate when they're being paid to watch someone's life collapse. HR Director Tom Brennan flanked Hargrove on the left, folder open, pen poised as if documentation was the most important thing happening in the room. Nurse Cooper. Sit. Not a request. A command. Hargrove's voice carried the particular confidence of a man who'd spent years arranging outcomes in his favor. Ashley Saturday. The box sat on her lap like a patient she was trying to protect. We've completed an investigation into yesterday's incident and your overall performance. Hargrove slid a folder across the desk with theatrical precision. Multiple concerns have emerged. What kind of concerns? Ashley's voice was steady. Pitch low. The voice she used with panicked patients before emergency procedures. Unauthorized medical procedures. Endangering yourself and patients by approaching an armed individual without waiting for security protocols to establish a perimeter. Hargrove was reading from a script he'd clearly rehearsed. Additionally, several serious discrepancies in your employment application regarding previous work history. Ashley opened the folder. Inside were performance write-ups dated months ago. Write-ups for incidents that had never happened. Incidents she knew were fabrications the moment she read them. Insubordination to Dr. Hargrove on March 14th. Failure to follow post-operative care protocol, patient Davis, room 347. Inappropriate responses to direct instruction, multiple witnesses. Signatures. Not hers. Fabricated. Professional. The kind of documentation that looked perfect because it had never been real. These are false. She said it without heat. A fact. Like stating blood type. We also have references who claim they have no record of you. Hargrove gestured to Tom Brennan, who produced a second stack of papers. Your prior employment history appears to have significant gaps. Your references are uncooperative or unavailable. This raises questions about the accuracy of your initial application. Ashley understood now. This was deliberate. This was Hargrove burning every bridge, severing every connection, making sure that if she tried to fight this, there would be nothing solid beneath her feet. No prior employment to verify. No character references. No professional history. The military had trained her to be invisible, and he was using that invisibility as a weapon. Effective immediately, you're terminated for cause. Hargrove produced a termination letter. Single page. Clean. Surgical. Separate from the security incident, your performance has been consistently problematic. We cannot maintain your employment. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Not subtle. Not gentle. Just present. Waiting. Ashley stood. Held the box. She wanted to say something devastating. Something that would make him understand what he'd just done, what he'd just triggered. But composure was muscle memory, and her muscles remembered Sanjin. They remembered the sound of incoming fire and the weight of a wounded Marine and the cold clarity of knowing that emotion was a luxury that got people killed. She said nothing. The walk through Oak Creek Memorial was designed for maximum exposure. She understood that now. Hargrove had timed it so the morning shift was arriving. The ER nurses clustered at the desk saw her carrying the cardboard box. Eyes widened. Mouths opened. No one spoke. The silence felt like its own kind of violence. Past room 347, where Lance Corporal Davis sat in his hospital bed, still in the early hours of recovery, and watched her pass with an expression that shifted from confusion to something deeper. Recognition trying to break through a locked door. The automatic doors opened onto the parking lot. Early morning still held the night's chill. Asphalt gleamed from pre-dawn humidity. The walk to her car felt like crossing a distance that had no actual measurement. She didn't cry until she was inside, doors locked, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then she cried. Not the dramatic sobs of the broken. The quiet, steady tears of someone who understood exactly what had just happened and had no one to tell. The drive home took 15 minutes. She knew it by heart. The route had become sacred over 9 years, small rituals, the coffee shop on Fayetteville Street, the turn onto her street, the driveway where she'd planted hydrangeas 3 springs ago. It was 1,400 hours when she sat down at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs, the cardboard box on the chair across from her like a dinner guest who'd come to deliver bad news. The back door opened without warning. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, sunlight from the hallway cutting around her edges like she was backlit by her own confusion. Emma was supposed to be at work. Emma was supposed to be anywhere but here, looking at her mother in scrubs at 2 in the afternoon on a day she should have been working until 1900. Mom. Emma's voice had that particular inflection of a daughter who sensed the world had shifted. Why are you home? What happened? Ashley looked at her daughter, 34 years old, attorney at a Raleigh firm, brilliant in ways that Ashley had tried to give her by never speaking about Afghanistan, by never mentioning Sanjin, by letting her believe her mother was just an ordinary woman with an ordinary past. She tried to speak and found nothing there. No words. No explanation that fit inside normal vocabulary. Emma's eyes moved past her to the hallway closet, where the shelf had come loose, spilling its contents. The combat boots tumbled out, worn leather the color of desert dust, laces still tied from the last time they'd been worn, years ago. Emma walked past her mother and picked them up with the careful attention of someone handling something dangerous. Whose boots are these? Ashley couldn't lie anymore. The muscles that had held composure for 9 years finally relaxed, and what came out was the truth, simple and broken. Mine. Emma stared at the boots, at her mother, at the empty cardboard box. You were never in the military. You always said you worked administration. You said you hated guns. You said? I lied. The word hung between them like a confession that had waited decades to be spoken. Emma sat down slowly at the kitchen table across from her mother and the box of her life, and neither of them spoke as the afternoon light moved through the kitchen like water, turning everything gold and then grey. The sound came the next morning at 0800. Not quiet. Not small. Heavy diesel engines. Multiple vehicles. The distinctive spacing and coordination of a military convoy moving with purpose. Emma heard it first from the kitchen, where she'd stayed the night on the couch, unwilling to leave but unable to ask the questions her mother couldn't answer. She walked to the window and went pale. Mom. There are hums on our street. Ashley appeared in sweatpants and a tank top, saw the 3 vehicles pulling up 2 blocks away at Oak Creek Memorial, saw the staff car, saw the uniforms, and closed her eyes like she could will the moment back into the future where it belonged. No, she whispered. Not now. Not like this. Emma grabbed her keys. I'm going over there. Ashley didn't stop her. At Oak Creek Memorial, the lobby had transformed into something between chaos and ceremony. The SEAL commander in dress uniform stood at the administration desk, and his voice, when he spoke, cut through every conversation like a blade through silk. I need Senior Chief Petty Officer Ashley Cooper. Immediately. Emma heard the words like they were in a foreign language. Senior Chief. Petty Officer. The rank landed in her chest like something with mass and heat and terrible weight. My mother is a Senior Chief Petty Officer. The command came naturally to him, the way breathing comes to a living person. Every eye turned toward him. He was what the word authority looked like when it wore a uniform and carried itself like it had survived things that ordinary men did not survive. Charge Nurse Marcia approached him with Ashley's military personnel file, hands trembling as she opened it. The pages were marked classified in sections, and her voice broke as she read. Ashley Marie Cooper, Senior Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy Special Warfare. Multiple deployments to, she turned the page and stopped. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Oh my God! Dr. Hargrove emerged from his office, and Emma watched the moment he understood. His face moved through shock, then alarm, then the particular expression of a man whose careful structures had begun to collapse around him. The SEAL commander didn't even look at him. You will address her by rank and you will shut your mouth. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room bent toward his words the way steel bends to magnetism. Senior Chief Cooper is being recalled for classified witness testimony regarding personnel she extracted under fire. Her presence is required by Naval Special Warfare Command. We were informed she was employed here until yesterday. He waited a beat. Let it land. That information is incorrect. She was terminated yesterday under false pretenses. A voice came from the edge of the crowd, rough and young and carrying the particular weight of recognition. Lance Corporal Davis, in his wheelchair, still in hospital gown, spoke toward the SEAL commander, but his eyes were locked on the space where Ashley would be, across the city, still sitting at a kitchen table with a pair of combat boots and a daughter who finally understood. Chief Cooper carried me 3 miles through Sanjin with 2 bullet wounds and a broken femur. I was bleeding out. She got me to the exfil bird. His hand moved to the tattoo on his forearm. I've had her name on my arm since the day I got to Walter Reed. The crowd was silent. FBI Special Agent Janet Kowalski stepped forward from where she'd been standing near billing records all morning, conducting the quiet work of watching evidence accumulate. Dr. Hargrove, we've been auditing hospital billing records for 6 weeks. Yesterday, you attempted to forge personnel documentation to justify termination. That's federal obstruction of justice. She produced a badge like a sentence. We need you to come with us. The silence that followed was the sound of a world reorganizing itself around a new truth. At 0800 hours, the convoy arrived like a blade. 3 hums and a staff car pulled through the Oak Creek Memorial parking lot with the precision of a tactical insertion. The vehicles didn't park, they positioned. Doors opened in synchronized silence. 6 personnel in dress uniforms exited the lead vehicle, moving with the terrifying fluid precision of men who'd trained together for years. The Navy SEAL commander, call sign Breaker, shoulders like a linebacker wrapped in dress blues, walked through the main entrance as if he owned it. His boot struck the tile with the sound of a court-martial. The lobby fell silent. Breaker approached the reception desk, where Margaret Stiles from administration was reviewing discharge paperwork. He didn't wait for her to look up. I'm looking for Senior Chief Petty Officer Ashley Cooper. Navy. This is not a request. His voice was a tank idling in a garage, all controlled power, no aggression needed. Emma Cooper was standing 15 feet away, filling out visitor paperwork for her mother's release from the hospital, the paperwork for the termination, the pink slip, the end. She turned slowly. Looked at the uniforms. Looked at Breaker's expression, which had the weight of classified operations behind it. She said numbly, "My mother is a senior chief petty officer." The charge nurse, Sarah Chen, who'd worked alongside Ashley for 7 years without knowing anything except that she was reliable and quiet, emerged from the back office holding a manila folder. Ashley's personnel file. The real one. Her hands began to tremble as she read the classified header stamps. She went pale the way people do when the floor beneath them liquefies. Hargrove appeared from his office, still wearing yesterday's arrogance-like armor. He saw the uniforms and something flickered across his face, not concern yet, just confusion. Men in dress blues didn't arrive at hospitals for disciplinary hearings. Breaker turned to face Hargrove directly. His eyes were the color of the Atlantic in winter. I'm Commander James Halloway, Naval Special Warfare Command. I need to inform you that you have just falsified federal military documentation and attempted to destroy the career of a decorated service member. He paused. Let the silence settle like snow. Senior Chief Cooper holds 2 Navy crosses. A silver star. 3 Purple Hearts. For operations I still cannot discuss. He let each medal fall like a sentence in a courtroom. Your attempt to terminate her was not merely illegal. It was treason. The words hung there. 2 FBI agents emerged from the stairwell. They'd been quietly auditing hospital billing records for 18 months, based on an anonymous tip that had arrived in their inbox with the precision of someone who knew exactly what to look for. They approached Hargrove with handcuffs already unclipped from their belts. Agent Kowalski, the senior investigator, held up a stack of printed documents. Dr. Richard Hargrove, you're under arrest for wire fraud, falsification of federal records, and obstruction of justice. You forged Senior Chief Cooper's personnel file yesterday to justify her termination. That forged document became federal evidence the moment you submitted it to hospital administration. Every copy, every transmission, it's all traceable. The second you tried to bury her, you buried yourself. Hargrove tried to maintain composure. His voice cracked on the first word. I want my lawyer. This is harassment. Board member Chen will. Patricia Chen is being arrested at her home right now, Kowalski interrupted. As is the CEO of Cardinal Medical Supply. Your entire network is done, Doctor. 18 months of audits. $473,000 in kickbacks. Phantom surgeries. Inflated billing codes. It's all documented. All traceable. All admissible. The handcuffs clicked onto Hargrove's wrists. The sound echoed through the lobby like a gavel. He tried to pull back, muscle memory and panic overriding intellect, but the FBI agents were trained for this. They moved with the calm professionalism of people who arrested people every day. You have the right to remain silent, Kowalski began, his voice as mechanical as a metronome. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The perp walk was methodical and devastating. They walked Hargrove through the same corridors Ashley had walked through yesterday, past the nurses' station where staff pressed themselves against the walls like they could become invisible, past the ER where the 250-pound gunman survivor watched from his ICU bed with the expression of someone who understood what consequence looked like, past room 347 where Lance Corporal Davis sat in his wheelchair and rendered a perfect military salute to the woman who'd carried him 3 miles through. Sanjin. The gesture was so unexpected, so formal, that several staff members began to cry. The doors closed behind them. 2 more agents followed. Their car pulled away from the curb with Hargrove's face visible in the rear window, the arrogance finally gone, replaced by the particular shade of white that comes when a man realizes everything he built was constructed on lies. Emma found her voice somewhere in her chest. Where is my mother? She looked at Breaker, at the uniforms, at the reality she'd been living in for the past 18 hours suddenly reorganizing itself. Is she okay? The commander's expression softened fractionally, just enough to show he was human. At home, I expect. We'll go to her. He gestured to the second vehicle. She'll want to see you. And there are things she needs to hear from me directly. The convoy moved through Raleigh with the purpose of a patrol heading toward something that mattered. They drove 2 blocks through rain that had started without warning, sudden summer rain that drummed against the windshields like Morse code. Ashley's house appeared on a quiet street, a 3-bedroom colonial with white shutters and a front porch that had never hosted anything more dramatic than a potted plant. She was standing in the driveway in jeans and a tank top, arms crossed, watching them approach with the expression of someone who'd already calculated 17 different outcomes and was waiting to see which one manifested. Breaker exited the vehicle and approached her with his uniform immaculate and his eyes steady. He stopped 3 feet away and rendered a salute, a full military salute, fist to chest, held for exactly 2 seconds. When he lowered his hand, his voice was different. Not professional. Human. Senior Chief. We need your testimony regarding Operation Copper Dawn. 3 Marines you extracted are facing medical discharge hearings due to service-connected injuries they sustained under your command. Your testimony regarding their conduct under fire could save their careers. Could save their lives. Ashley didn't move. Didn't salute back. The rain continued its methodical percussion against the driveway. I'm not active duty, Commander. I walked away 9 years ago. I can't do this. I chose not to do this anymore. You can, Breaker said quietly. You did it for 9 years in combat. You did it yesterday with an armed civilian in your ER. You're doing it right now, standing in your driveway, choosing whether to save those Marines or let the VA destroy them. That's command, Senior Chief. That's what command looks like when you're not wearing the uniform. You're not broken, Emma said. Breaker handed her a tablet showing Lance Corporal Davis's medical file. She took it with hands that were steady again, the professional composure snapping back into place like an armor piece. The file showed his injuries. His PTSD diagnosis. The VA denial for service-connected disability because they claimed his traumatic brain injury was pre-service. The note that said, if she was there, she can testify. Ashley looked at the screen, then at Emma, then at the combat boots visible through her open front door, the pair she'd kept in that closet for 9 years, never unpacking them, never acknowledging them, just letting them sit there like a ghost in the dark. She made a decision. 5 years later, Raleigh Community College, room 142, 1900 hours. Former Dr. Richard Hargrove stood in front of 18 students demonstrating CPR compression technique on a training dummy, his hands moving through the motions with mechanical precision. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Repeat. He earned $16.50 per hour. His medical license was revoked after 18 months in federal prison. The hospital had paid $47 million in settlements and fines. Patricia Chen served 2 years. The CEO of Cardinal Medical Supply served 4. Hargrove saw Emma Cooper in the hallway between classes. She was a first-year nursing student now, clinical rotation at Duke, working on the same unit where her mother had once been invisible. Emma didn't acknowledge him. Didn't slow down. Just walked past like he was furniture. At Oak Creek Memorial, the lobby now featured a small bronze plaque mounted beside the main desk, in recognition of Senior Chief Petty Officer Ashley Cooper, United States Navy, retired, whose service embodies the warrior spirit in all its forms. The inscription caught the afternoon light. Ashley stood in dress uniform at Raleigh National Veteran Cemetery for a Medal of Honor ceremony honoring a fallen SEAL she'd served with in 2008. She'd transitioned to veterans advocacy work, consulting with VA hospitals on PTSD treatment protocols, designing trauma-informed nursing practices, training the next generation of combat medics in civilian healthcare systems. Her limp was more pronounced now. She'd stopped hiding it, stopped protecting it, just let it exist as part of who she was. Lance Corporal Davis stood beside her in dress blues, promoted to sergeant after Ashley's testimony saved his career. The ceremony concluded with the precision of military ritual, and they walked together toward the parking area with the rain starting again, the same kind of sudden summer rain that had arrived the day the convoy came. Davis stopped walking. Reached for her hand. His voice was steady but thick with something that had been waiting 9 years to be said. "Chief, I need to say this. I remember now. I remember everything. Sanjin, the fire, you screaming at me to stay awake, the blood on your hands, all of it. For 9 years it was gone and I thought that made me broken. Thought my brain had deleted it to protect me. But seeing you at the hospital, watching you move through that ER, hearing your voice talk down a man with a gun, it unlocked something. You gave me my life twice. Once in Sanjin. Once in that hospital room when you reminded me who I was." Ashley squeezed his hand. "You survived, Davis. You did that. I just kept you conscious long enough to get you to the birds. We did that, Chief. Together." He paused. "Are you teaching at the VA hospital like you said?" "Twice a week. Tactical medicine for ER nurses. Turns out a lot of what we learn downrange saves civilian lives in trauma bays." She looked at the cemetery, the rows of white headstones, the flags that seemed to hold up the sky. "I used to think I had to choose between warrior and healer. Spent 9 years pretending I'd made that choice. Took getting fired and publicly humiliated to realize they're the same thing. You can't be one without understanding the other." They reached her car. She popped the trunk, revealing the worn combat boots she now kept there, not hidden in a closet anymore, not denied, just present. Accessible. Honored. She pulled them out, held them for a moment the way you hold something that's cost you more than you can measure, then set them back carefully. Emma appeared from the parking area, now wearing her clinical credentials, clinical hours logged, rotation almost complete. She hugged her mother, nodded to Davis with the understanding of someone who'd finally learned what service looked like. "Ready, Mom." Ashley picked up the combat boots one more time, really looked at them, the scuffed leather, the laces that had been retied 1,000 times, the mud that no amount of cleaning could fully erase. "Yeah. Ready." She closed the trunk gently. As they drove away, she said to Emma, "You do not need a badge or a gun to be a warrior. You just need to show up when it matters. The way you showed up for me. The way Davis showed up yesterday. The way those nurses showed up every single shift without knowing what they were really part of." Emma smiled. Her mother's smile. I learned from the best, senior chief. The camera held on the cemetery, the boots visible in the trunk as the car pulled away, the sun setting behind the headstones like a closing ceremony. The rain continued, steady and patient and real. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated and proven them wrong, or if you've known someone quietly carrying invisible scars, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We tell these stories about the quiet heroes among us because they deserve to be seen. Comment below, have you ever judged someone only to find out you were completely wrong about who they really were?